Health Empowerment News, episode number 25. Welcome back to another episode of Health Empowerment News with CROFT WOODRUFF. This week, the devastation in Japan and his nuclear power, clean energy. And welcome back to another episode of Health Empowerment News with CROFT WOODRUFF. We're here in downtown Vancouver, Studio 604. Good morning, CROFT.
Good morning, and how are you today?
I'm doing all right. Just still in the aftermath of that earthquake. It's still top on my mind, all the devastation that's going on in Japan there.
Absolutely unbelievable, but I'm sorry to say foreseeable.
Mm-hmm. These things happen, and it looks like we're in for a lot more damage than we've already seen. First, there was the earthquake, 8.9 on the Richter scale in northern Japan. And then, of course, the tsunami that followed.
What was the height of those waves?
Oh, they were quite high and going at 800 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
So just horrible devastation in the northern towns.
Yeah, whole villages, 20,000 people or more get swept away, and maybe they're lucky if there's 9,000 people left behind. Unbelievable. And
President Obama in a press conference said that this just reminds us how fragile life really is. And,
that's right.
And how Mother Nature has supreme power over the earth.
And it also reminds us of some of the things that we kind of know about, but we kind of toss aside. You know, I could think of some massacres that took place in Afghanistan, a decade ago or so, where thousands of people were suffocated to death in containers. Others were shipped off to fight for another day. And, of course, then we can think of incidences like whatever happened to Nurse Naira. Do you remember Nurse Naira? She was the ambassador, the Iraqi ambassador to the United States. She was his daughter, but she was posing as a nurse, and she's 15 years old. She's testifying to a committee of Congress and senators of the United States, saying that she witnessed Iraqi troops dumping babies onto the hospital floor from their incubators. And by the time it got around, it was almost like 40 babies were dumped and buried and one thing or another. And the lie was repeated again and again by so many people. And, of course, that was their justification to go after Iraq. And yet it turns out that there might have been one or two babies, if not even that. I doubt. One gentleman said that he doubts very much that the Kuwaiti hospital would have any more than about 2 incubators, never mind 40. So this is a sort of nonsense that goes on when they're warmongering.
Yeah, there's certainly not too many good guys in the whole equation here. We've got, of course, Saddam Hussein had blood on his hands, and so did everybody else. So,
but he didn't have the weapons of mass destruction that we were told about that we had to take care of.
No, and that was clearly an excuse to get in there.
That's right. And we've got the same thing now with Libya.
The weapons that they did have were completely destroyed in the first Gulf War.
That's right, and they were supplied by guess who? The United States.
And they were showing images of this is my understanding of it. They were showing images of these installations that were from 10 years prior, and those facilities were destroyed in the first Gulf War. and they knew that, but they just used that as,
recycled it again,
as propaganda to get the public behind moving into Iraq. And that's a totally different scenario here. We're talking about tragedies, we're talking about disasters. In this case,
and how we forget one disaster leads to another, it seems.
In this case, the earthquake is not a man-made disaster, or at least we don't believe that it is. Some people could argue that it's part of global warming or part of climate change or various other things that we're doing to the earth. But really, this is Mother Nature going, about her business.
That's right. And of course, when we consider what's happened with these nuclear power plants, one of them exploding and another one on the way, it's not nice to fool with Mother Nature.
No, and that's one of the things I mentioned on Facebook earlier, or late last night, was, I guess, the cleanest form of energy, because that's what the nuclear energy industry builds themselves as, the cleanest form of energy. I guess when they build themselves as the cleanest form of energy, they don't take into consideration the risk of an earthquake, because a nuclear meltdown is far from clean. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening now, or is potentially happening now. As far as I know, there isn't an out-and-out meltdown, but there is. They don't have the power to run the coolant system, and they're venting off radioactive steam. And in the area directly surrounding the reactor, it's 1,000 times the normal levels of radiation. So it's
so what does 1,000 times mean to any individual, unless they're really into nuclear power and nuclear radiation? It's just another another word, if you will. 1,000 times times what? So... Well,
whatever would be, I guess, normal around a nuclear power plant, the safe, acceptable levels
acceptable to whom?
That are there. Well, that's another story again.
It's frightening when you stop to think of it, because acceptable to whom? All I can say is that an individual who is concerned about exposure to these things, you want to be as far away from these facilities as you possibly can be. And sure, where we are on the west coast of Canada, we're, considerable. How many thousand miles away are we from Japan? And one of those tsunamis did reach parts of... I understand northeastern BC, Tofino or someplace like that. Also, someplace in Oregon they got it, and someplace in Northern California they got a bit of a tidal wave as well. And
this time around,
yes,
yeah. The brunt of the wave didn't actually. It landed south of BC.
Yes,
this time. So I guess they got a little bit of in Tofino. They were saying they got some erratic waves and some weird currents and things like that going on. But south of the border, they were hit a little bit harder. Mm-hmm. One death was reported. Some damage to marinas and things like that. But yeah.
So you don't know just how far away you can be from these things to be absolutely safe. My concern would be, where do you buy your food these days? You want to be, I think, buying locally grown. And you also want to make sure that you intake antioxidants that will help to protect you to whatever exposure you will have to the radiation increase that we will be subject to.
Yeah, because especially here on the West Coast, we've got, Japan is directly across the Pacific from us, and the current, the weather patterns and the winds are blowing directly to Vancouver, basically.
Yes.
So we are, if there is a meltdown there, we could be subjected to whatever levels of radioactive winds, and possibly, I guess, it could be in the rain, and we could be exposed to some radiation. So what kind of natural products are good for kind of defending us against that?
Well, if I was a woman who was, maybe a few weeks or a couple of months pregnant, I would be taking fairly large increases of vitamin C, probably on the order of 2 or 3 grams a day or more. At least bring it up to the point where you have diarrhea, if you will. In other words, your bowel movements are much looser, which is a good sign that you are utilizing as much vitamin C as your body possibly can. Another important factor, I think, is selenium. Is also an important antioxidant, and can have I would say a positive effect on the body as far as being exposed to nuclear radiation or fallout. Also, other antioxidants, all your antioxidants really, vitamin E, vitamin A, the carotenoids, which are also part of vitamin A, vitamin D. All of these things have, I think, a very important effect. And the only thing you can do is just bring your intake up to the point where you don't have any effect like, say, diarrhea, as I mentioned, with regard to too much vitamin C, and just bring them at higher levels, but also make sure that the products that you're buying are local. And of course, for those people who are fortunate enough to have a garden, my advice to you is to plant a garden. And of course, it's just about the time of the year when spring is approaching, and a good time to consider planting a garden. And from that point of view, we can do ourselves a lot of good. Over time, of course, the effects of what's happened in Japan will eventually wear off. We saw that with Chernobyl. When that power plant blew up, and it didn't even have a containment building, as I understand it. And they still have taken whole populations out of there. Thousands of Russians were moved away. And even now, from the last that I read about it, is that wildlife seems to be coming back, and things seem to be gradually returning to normal.
Even with Chernobyl, there was radioactive fallout that had reached other regions.
That's right.
France, they had a higher incidence of miscarriages and I believe birth defects as well in close to the Alps there in Grenoble and other areas around there.
Yes.
So, it doesn't, it's not just an isolated geographic area. Yeah. This, the effects of the radiation can travel.
Yes.
It's
like I said, if you have already, if you're a woman and you're expecting and you're a few months into term, this is a time to just be sure that you're increasing your antioxidant factors to help protect you against any exposure that you may run into in this regard as far as radiation is concerned.
Probably good advice for everybody.
Absolutely.
Just to increase
Absolutely.
their
Men and women,
level.
for sure, because we're just as much exposed to it as women are in that regard.
So you mentioned vitamin C, vitamin D,
vitamin A,
and the other antioxidants.
The carotenoids, which is your vitamin A, provitamin A. Vitamin D we mentioned. Also selenium.
Okay, why selenium?
It seems to have an effect of binding up the factors that can cause birth defects. It does have an antioxidant activity. Mm-hmm. How well it's going to be in this regard, I can't really say. I think that vitamin C is probably one of your best bets.
Okay. And you also mentioned buying local fruits and vegetables.
Buying local fruit and vegetables, and be very careful about where other fruit and vegetables that you're buying that are, processed and canned and coming from different places. I had an experience with peaches from China, and I swear to God, they I don't even think they were ripe when they were canned, and You just don't know what you're getting when you buy canned food.
It's interesting because I'm just reading on the natural news site, naturalnews.com, that the town of Sedgwick in Maine currently leads the pack as far as food sovereignty is concerned, because local residents voted unanimously at a town hall meeting to pass an ordinance that reinforces its citizens' God-given rights to produce, process, sell, purchase, and consume local foods of their choosing, which includes even state and federally restricted foods like raw milk. And it's the first declaration of its kind to be passed in the U.S., and is not going to be the last, because several other Maine towns, including Penobscot, Brooksville, and Blue Hill, all have similar ordinances up for voting in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and I think the public health authorities are going to have to sit down and really have a complete reappraisal of their position on situations like raw milk. Because the bottom line is that the problems that they claim that they had with raw milk had more to do with sanitation than it had to do with the raw milk.
Really?
Yeah, people not washing their hands and before handling food of any kind.
I thought the problem with raw milk was that it was marketed as a health product and was infringing on the big dairies.
Well, I think that would be a very good, position to take, because, of course, it is a threat to big dairy. Everything that big dairy does, everything is pasteurized and homogenized and otherwise iced to maintain shelf life. Whereas anybody who is interested in accessing raw milk knows that they'll have a shelf life, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to drink it fairly quick.
That's right. Whereas you might be in more trouble by keeping on hand homogenized milk that might be a few days over its expiry date.
It's interesting, this law that was passed down in Maine in this community, it also declares that it's a crime for state and federal authorities to violate ordinance provisions in any way. It states that it shall be unlawful for any law or regulation adopted by the state or federal government to interfere with the rights recognized by this ordinance. So,
how did they get that through the legislature?
Well, it's in their own
constitution,
their own town's bylaws, I suppose.
I see. So you'll have a conflict between the town's bylaws and that of the state's bylaws.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there is any action taken by the federal government, the FDA. What kind of legal ramifications there are. I'm wondering if they'll even acknowledge that ordinance as a valid.
I would say offhand that they'll probably just trample right over it like they've done everything else in the last 30 or 40 years, insofar as democratic rights are concerned.
Yeah, it's very interesting because same thing with in California when they were voting on legalization of marijuana for not just medical purposes, which it's legal in Washington, in California for medical reasons,
mm-hmm.
but they had a vote last year to legalize it for recreational purposes too.
Mm-hmm.
But
it was defeated, wasn't it?
It was defeated by a narrow margin in the referendum or the
next time around. It could very well be.
Well, it was a close vote, but the federal government, the Drug Enforcement Agency.
They're the ones that will step in on it. And
they're enforcing federal law, and they said whether or not it passes in California is irrelevant. They're still violating federal law, and we're going to enforce this thing.
Yeah.
So, but
it's going to be very interesting to see how all of this turns out. One of the reasons why the authorities don't like marijuana is because it makes people peaceful. And you can't have peaceful people if you are on a warmongering society, which we happen to be. You have to see what is going on in the Middle East, and you know that we are in a warmongering society.
Yeah, and I was reading an interesting article. This is a digression, but about how Iran and their bid for nuclear weapon and
nuclear power
is not aimed at who people think it's aimed at. And this gentleman was writing the article saying that Iran's real aggression is aimed at the Sunnis, because Persia used to be the dominant empire in the region, and they want to regain that past glory, and they're acquiring allies in the various countries surrounding Saudi Arabia, and that they're planning a war with Saudi Arabia. What do you think of that?
I think it's just so much claptrap.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the sort of hysteria that you see on Fox TV if you are unfortunate enough to have access to it, which fortunately I don't, but I see enough of what's going on other networks to know that they've got a maniac running that network, as far as I can see, to allow such a program to even be on the air. It's nothing but claptrap.
Yeah, yeah. So you think that story is
it's just so much science fiction. That's all it is.
Yeah. Well, there definitely is. It's kind of like in Northern Ireland, Protestants versus Catholics. Mm-hmm. It's the Shiites versus the Sunnis. There is that tension there, but whether or not there's this grand conspiracy to
and whose advantage is enabled, shall we say, by supporting such concepts, shall we say, who is best advantaged by this? I don't think that a nuclear war is going to be to Iran's advantage, and I think they should be able to see that themselves when they see what's happening with just nuclear power.
I don't necessarily believe that they would want to use the weapon, but just having the weapon is
act as a deterrent.
Gives them a different position in the region. But so it's interesting to see how these things are going. To get back to the food thing and this ordinance that was passed in Maine, it's interesting to see how when people take the matter into their own hands in their local communities, if you can pass change in all the local communities, you've already accomplished what you need to accomplish.
Yes.
In nationally, anyways. So, if this kind of thing can spread at a grassroots level, you don't really need to get the federal politicians behind it, anyways, because once everyone has passed this in their local communities, it's already done.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good strategy to take in terms of this kind of legislation. Don't worry about the people at the top. Just pass it locally, and then once everybody's behind this, it becomes a federal issue, anyways.
Yeah.
Both in Canada and the United States.
And we'll just have to see how this all works out. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we were talking about protecting yourself from possible radiation
exposure from this business in Japan.
Yeah, and if there is any fallout spreading out to wherever you happen to live. But really, this is something that is, it's like, it's better off not to happen in the first place. So like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. What are the alternative sources of power? Like what is, there's a big push for nuclear power because it's
well, we've been told up to now that it was cleanest.
Yeah, it's clean power as long as two things happen. A natural disaster like this doesn't completely destroy the reactor and shut off power and prevent it from being able to function, and then there's a meltdown. Or the other thing that has to happen is that the plutonium or uranium and all these toxic radioactive chemicals have to be stored somewhere.
Yes.
And they have to be stored safely. So it's not 100% clean by any means.
Well, of course, you also have the fact that they've been using depleted uranium, which is a byproduct of the nuclear power industry, in weapons of destruction. These depleted uranium-coated shells can go right into a tank and just go right through it and destroy everything inside, and that's that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the depleted uranium itself, which is a fallout as a result of this reaction. And of course, you have that to deal with, and this is where the powers of this planet, these governments, have betrayed the people of this earth because of allowing this depleted uranium to be used in war technology.
So this clean power, under the best circumstances, clean power. What are the alternatives? There's solar power, and solar technology has come a long way in the last few years. Excuse me. There's now they have the technology to use paint that is
can produce power.
Yeah.
From the sunlight.
So you paint your car with the solar power, and
it'll charge your battery for you.
Battery. Also, there's regenerative braking.
Mm-hmm.
There's the fact that the materials that we use for cars are heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of using steel for cars, you can use these composite fibers that are super, super strong and very, very light.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a book called I think it's called The Green Economy. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll just make a note now. I think it's called the Green or Green Capitalism, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put that in the show notes. And he makes a huge point on these supercars, he calls them,
mm-hmm.
Having being just as strong as steel, but being super light, and with all these technologies added into them, they become virtually energy free.
Mm-hmm.
They don't use very much energy at all
by comparison to what we do today.
Yeah, because we're taking these huge tanks, like steel produced vehicles,
mm-hmm.
which we produce in this way because to protect ourselves or
mm-hmm.
whatever. But these other fiber composite cars can be created with to be almost as strong, but dramatically lighter,
mm-hmm.
and therefore it takes less energy to move them.
And to make them too, probably.
Yeah, I mean, over time, and also the cost of maintaining an electric car is much less because there's fewer moving parts. You don't have this engine to deal with. An electric
mm-hmm.
engine doesn't have the moving parts. It doesn't need the service. It doesn't need the uptake that a conventional internal combustion engine does, and that's part of the problem.
It's going to be quite a revolution.
That's part of the whole problem of moving in this direction, is because the automotive industry makes most of its income from not the sale of the car, but the regular maintenance and service of the car. There's a
mm-hmm.
multi-billion-dollar industry in servicing vehicles, and that's one of the things that are slowing down this whole move to electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
But so there's solar power. And things we can do with technology to eliminate the need for fossil fuels as a means of transportation. But there's also wind power.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just down a couple of months ago down in Palm Springs.
Mm-hmm.
And we took about a half-hour bus trip over to the main outlet mall over there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was literally thousands of these things off the side of the highway in the desert there. Quite a few of them actually weren't running, but it was just amazing to see these wind farms and thousands of them. So, I mean, obviously we're doing it, but maybe we need to look at doing this at a higher degree. And we've got one running up on
Seymour
on Grouse Mountain.
Is it Grouse Mountain? Pardon me.
Yeah, up on Grouse Mountain,
mm-hmm.
and it's apparently providing 1/3 to 1/2 of the needs of Grouse Mountain's electricity bill.
Mm.
So
who built that, Hydro or the Grouse Mountain?
Grouse Mountain, and there was a big fiasco over that because they got it all approved by the appropriate
authorities,
who are able to approve these things, and then they got it up there, and BC Hydro didn't let them get it going because they wanted to approve it, but they wanted them to jump through the hoops again with them. So I was talking to somebody up there who was before it, because it was delayed for several months.
Conflicts of interest,
and it was just like, okay, that's just red tape that we don't need.
But they finally got it going, didn't
they?
Yeah,
it's going, and it's very cool. So this kind of thing, there's tidal power, which is harnessing the power of the ocean
itself,
as the tides come in and out to turn turbines.
Yeah, the tide comes in and out twice every 24 hours, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. So so it's continually would be creating power, and there'd be peak times where it's creating a lot of power. Then there's algae fuel, using solar energy and algae to synthesize liquid fuel, I'm not sure if you wouldn't call that biodiesel, I guess, but it would be creating fuel using algae, and there's all sorts of things like this. I subscribe to a newsletter, an email newsletter called Gizmag. It's from the folks over at gizmag.com. And it's a lot of technology stuff. So over there, you'll get like information on tablet computers and all sorts of things. But in addition to that, you'll get a ton of information on green energy technology as it comes out. So as the research comes out, they publish it. And there's all sorts of other sites that cover green energy, but this one is I find it's pretty informative. So if you go over to gizmag.com, I'll put that in the show notes as well. To me, when I see all these innovative technologies coming out, I don't really see the need to produce all these nuclear power plants. China has plans to build 28 new nuclear power plants in its country by in the next 8 years, and a heck of a lot more after that. So, sure, in the best case scenario, it could be the cleanest power if everything is done right.
Yeah,
cleanest source of power. But
the Japanese could have made it right had they instead of relying on battery backup, they'd have a couple of diesel generators handy.
Yep, and there should be contingency plans in place for everything. But to me, you don't say something is the cleanest form of energy under the best possible circumstances. You have to take into account the worst possible circumstance, because when there is a natural disaster and we're dealing with wind power, I mean, we're going to lose the turbines. We're not going to cause a radioactive disaster.
Well, this is what gets me. They have all that steam coming off of those reactors. And you'd think that they would have had it set up that they'd pull that off and have it turning turbines and generators.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got so much of it, you'd think they'd be able to have something to do with it. Besides, they should. In other words, it's fail-safe. And unfortunately, as far as I can figure out, they didn't really do enough in terms of fail-safe is concerned.
This is a small amount of energy that I'm thinking of right now, but there's just an example of the kind of things that I've been reading on this Gizmag site. Is they've got shoes, because you're walking every day. If you walk to work, or if you just walk around throughout the day, they've got these shoes that have a little, it's like a spring in the heel. And the spring, because you're compressing it and releasing it ongoing as you walk, it can generate just enough power to charge your iPod or your cell phone or
a small radio, something like that.
Yeah, something like that, just from walking around, and that's the energy that you're spending anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're just capturing things that we're doing on an ongoing basis and capturing the energy. Another thing, down in the States, there's I think it's a Burger King chain, if I remember correctly. they put these. It's like kind of like a scale where the person drives onto the scale through the drive-through, and it causes a compression. And so every time the cars drive over these generators is what they are, because it's the weight of the car causes the turbine or whatever, the piston, to move, and
it turns a turbine or something or other.
Yeah, and it generates electricity. So imagine if you had these things on a busy street, just one after the other as the cars drive through on their daily rush hour traffic, it could generate electricity. These kind of things are basically, they say there's no such thing as free energy. That because of the third law of thermodynamics, we can't create energy out of nothing. But if we're using this energy anyways, for people that get to work,
motion, you will certainly have a certain amount of loss as the vehicle goes over this treadmill, if you will. But
the energy that you do get, it's all going to come down to whether the cost of the technology is worth the
investment.
Capture of the energy. Another thing is there's someone developed that is, and you can find this at gizmag.com if you do a search on their site. Somebody developed a way to harvest Wi-Fi signals and convert it into energy. So right now I've got a modem running a Wi-Fi signal, a router, and I've got my computers here that are connected to that and connected to the internet wirelessly. But there's somebody developed this little device that will harvest the Wi-Fi signal and convert it into energy. So you could charge your cell phone or your computer just by all the hotspots that are emitting this Wi-Fi signal. So the unused Wi-Fi signal can be harvested and turned into energy. So
that
these kind of
again.
innovative technologies that are coming out, and the way I look at it is technology is a double-edged sword. Technology is beautiful, and we can use it to save us, or we can use it to destroy us. We get to decide. So, and historically, we've made some pretty bad decisions. So it's time that we started making some good ones.
Yeah, unfortunately, always that somebody else's unfortunate circumstance, it seems.
Yep, and so basically, the message today is nuclear power safe? Not when it comes to a devastating earthquake.
8.9 magnitude, pretty high.
Yeah, it was 500 times as powerful as the 1989 San Francisco earthquake, which kind of puts it in perspective.
That was 1989 in San Francisco.
Yeah. So 500 times, I believe, is what they said. So, so that's it that's all I have to say on that topic. What about you, Croft?
Well, I really haven't got much more to say about it as far as I can. There's so much that we're going to be coping with, I'm sure, over the next few years with regard to this situation and coming out of Japan.
And I'm sure there's going to be some job openings for really good and skilled PR professionals that are going to be hired by the nuclear power industry.
We'll try and get it across that it's not as bad as we think it is.
Yeah. Or to spin it. And I guess that's it for this week. We'll see you again next week. And thanks for the chat today, Croft.
Yeah, and if you have a question, in particular on health and nutrition, which is my favorite, venue, I'd be glad to hear from you.
Yeah, just give us a call at 1-877-636-1474, and we'll get you into the show if that's what you want. Otherwise, you can ask a question, and we can read the question out ourselves. Or if you want to send an email, you can send an email to Croft.
Well, you can be croft.woodruff@gmail.com. That will get me.
Yeah, or you can send it to myself as well at Andrew@podcasthero.com. And that's it for this week. We'll see you again next week.